Welcome to the Four Fires Podcast, where we talk about winning in all four of the essential areas of life.
All right, guys, welcome back to the Four Fires Podcast. Today I'm having a conversation with my friend Josh Chaffin. So, Josh, welcome to the podcast.
It's good to be here, Jeff.
Yeah. So, Josh, why don't you give us a little intro about who you are, where you're from, and stage of life?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm in Mount Pleasant, Michigan, kind of right in the middle of the Lower Peninsula. My wife, Wendy, and I will be celebrating 20 years of marriage here this summer. And so that's kind of a big milestone that we're excited about. And we are raising three boys. I have Asher, who's 15, Titus, who's 11, and Zeke, who's 9 right now. And we are learning to be a family on mission and live intentionally right in our sphere of influence right here in Michigan. And so I had been in campus ministry for, I believe, 16 years, and then recently, within the last 2 years, transitioned over to a ministry called Big Life, which is a discipleship-based ministry. So I'm out in the community a lot. I have a lot of one-on-one meetings or small group meetings. I work a lot with college students in various ways as well. I think it was about 2 years ago, I was at a leadership conference retreat and I met Alan Kemper as well as Jeff. That's where I heard about the Four Fires. Since then, I've implemented a Four Fires fire group in my community, in my neighborhood actually. Also, Jeff talked me into doing a ruck, which I went in kicking and screaming. It was actually a really good experience to do that ruck last November.
Yeah, that's great. Yesterday, I actually recorded a podcast with one of the other guys that has done a ruck, Micah Burdett. So I got a really good podcast yesterday about a story from somebody who went through a 30-day ruck. Maybe you and I will do another podcast in the future where you share your ruck experience.
Hey, that'd be great.
Yeah. But what we're going to talk about today is the people fire and the importance of regular gathering. And so the reason that we're talking about this is actually from your 30-day ruck, Josh. So you shared when you were in the middle of your ruck, explained the importance of people, and I think you kind of specified the importance of men getting together in small groups regularly and consistently, and how that's helped you on your journey of growing closer to God. And it seems like people don't really see the need for this as much anymore, gathering on a regular basis. Like you mentioned, having dinner together and, I don't know, going on walks or whatever it is, just hanging out with people often. People seem to be making a lot of excuses that, I don't have time for that because of our busy schedules. We just live in just boom, boom, go, go, go. So what have you personally experienced the biggest benefit of regular gatherings with other men? And I mean, why did you say that this was such an important thing? What's your story around it?
Yeah, well, I think my first experience with it was in college. A few different groups every year. People were graduating and leaving, and others were coming in. But in college, there's a few different times where I had just a close-knit community of guys. And some of the one I'm thinking of lasted a few years. Actually, it wasn't just a one-year thing, but there were three of us, my friend Tony, my friend Josh, and the three of us. It was so encouraging. It was life-giving. We would have so much fun together, and that included road trips and bonfires and worship times and prayer times and real in-depth conversations, and also just a ton of fun just being together. And so that was kind of my first taste of deep, rich community. And then from there, as changed as I grew older, as I live in a college town and I worked in a college ministry, some of that changed where it wasn't so much peer to peer as it was with kind of me being a mentor to others. But then as I went along saying, man, I need a mentor. So then I found some older guys to mentor me while I was mentoring others. And it was just so helpful the past 25 years of my life to have different guys at different seasons to really do life together with, to be able to speak truth to one another, to laugh with, to play sports with, and to really just sharpen each other to be better men, better husbands, now better fathers. And I've just found community is so necessary. And yet in our culture, so often we're individuals. So we ought to like, as guys, we don't ask for directions. We don't do all these other things. But I've just found those are things that, well, I still don't like asking for directions, but there are things that we need each other. I need to learn from other guys, just even creative ideas. Like, I don't know if I have to do exactly what they do, but like, oh, this guy did something that helped him be a better father, helped him connect with his son, or helped him connect with his kids. Maybe it's not the same thing, but I'm going to learn from that. And I'm going to take some of those ideas and implement them to be a better husband, better follower of Christ. So, yeah, community's been so important to me.
Yeah. I mean, why do you think so many? I would say that a lot of men, I've read some research studies that, a vast majority of men feel isolated and that they don't have anyone to confide in, or they have just this lack of brotherhood. So, why do you think that's the case?
I think there's a number of things that play into it. Some of it is we've believed the lie that the guy has to have it all figured out, to know everything, to be strong, and to show any type of vulnerability or ask any questions is sometimes perceived as a weakness. But I think vulnerability and even learning to depend on others can actually create great camaraderie. We see that from Jesus and his disciples. They were vulnerable with each other. Peter even felt bold enough to rebuke Jesus at different times and say, Jesus, you're wrong. And then Jesus had to turn around and rebuke him. There's something about they had a relationship where Peter could do that. And I think so often in our culture, we want to just feel like we have it all together, but it takes vulnerability. Think of athletic teams or the police or the military. They're all seen as the tough guys, but there's a great camaraderie because in that training, in that preparation, they all have weaknesses and they need each other to accomplish their goals. And so we need to break down, starting, I think, with our minds. If we want to be a good husband, I need other guys to encourage me and challenge me and say, hey, Josh, is that really a good idea for your marriage? If I want to be a good father, I need other guys to learn from, to grow from, and just to be a strong man who is a good contributor to society. I need to learn from others. I believe that starts with our mind of saying, I do need help. I do need mentors. I do need to read books and learn from others as opposed to just saying, I'll figure it out myself.
Yeah, for sure. So, what does Scripture say about building authentic community?
Quite a bit. I mean, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, it's the story, and most of it is about Jesus with his 12 guys, and at times some amazing women, at times some others. I think of Lazarus and his sisters, Mary and Martha. Like, Lazarus wasn't one of the 12, but he was close with Jesus. Mary and Martha were close with Jesus. Jesus showed vulnerability that even though he was God, he received help, specifically from women who supported his ministry. And he could have just like pulled money out of thin air. But he was vulnerable and he's like, I will let you contribute because it's good for my guys to see that. It's good for the whole kingdom to realize that we each get to contribute to this. I just think of the Gospels, but especially in Hebrews 10, in verses 24 and 25, it says, and let us consider how to stir up one another toward love and good works, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. And so I used to just read that passage and I'm like, yep, that's Sunday morning. We do not neglect Sunday morning. But if you look at some of the details around it, I think it's for everyday life. It says, consider how to stir up one another toward love and good works. We can do that on Sunday morning. But man, sometimes it's easier when there's five of us together. Sometimes that's easier one-on-one in a car ride to maybe a kid's sporting event. I've been doing a lot of that lately with some other dads going to sporting events. And so do I take time to think and pray and say, how can I encourage this guy towards love? And maybe that love is for their kids, for their wife, for their coworkers. Or how do I stir them up toward good deeds? I think men are at our best when we're contributing, when we're not thinking about self, but when we're thinking about others. How do we contribute in our situations to our cities, to our churches? How do we contribute? And so I'm thinking, how can I encourage this guy today? How can I spur him on? And often as I'm doing that, of course, I'm also having to reflect on myself saying, Wow, maybe I should do that too. I don't want to just encourage someone else to do that, but I want to do that as well. And so that's a verse I go to often. And that doesn't just mean that Sunday morning larger group gathering. I really think a lot of that can be done in everyday life, like with my boys around the dinner table, or some of these road trips, or just in the smaller fire circles or small groups, things like that. It's so important to come in saying, I want to encourage someone. I want to say, I see something in you that maybe you don't see in yourself. You can go for it and you'll make a difference.
Yeah. One of my favorite ones is Proverbs 18, verse 1. And it says, one who isolates himself pursues selfish desires. He rebels against all sound judgment.
We can end the
Yeah,
podcast.
and then verse 2 says, a fool does not delight in understanding, but only wants to show off his own opinion. That's a good one too. But yeah, I mean, it clearly is saying you should not isolate yourself.
Absolutely.
I think that it's really dangerous for men too when they isolate themselves, because we have our thoughts and it's like, welcome back to the Four Fires podcast. If you enjoy listening to this podcast, please go down and leave us a 5-star rating and share this episode with a friend. It really helps us get all of this Four Fires content to more men so that we can accomplish our mission of building an army of four-dimensional men. Thanks so much. Live intentionally, and I hope you enjoy the show. Okay, I made up my mind. That's the way that life works. That's the truth. And it might be completely false or
Right.
very judgmental or just unhealthy in some way. So when we have other men that we're bouncing our ideas off of, specifically other men that we know are men who are pursuing God and are godly men that can give us sound advice, it's definitely dangerous when you isolate yourself. It's not just not good for your emotions and your psychiatric stuff. It can be really dangerous in the pride that builds up within you when you feel like, all right, this is how life works. I have all the answers. Nobody needs to question me. I think it's dangerous if you have a man who only isolates himself with his family. Maybe he's a dominant man and he doesn't let any other men in, but he dominates his wife and his kids. And that can be very toxic, I think.
Yeah, it absolutely can, because they're again isolated and they don't have those guys speaking into their life, encouraging them, saying, hey, have you thought about this? Is that really best for your family? I love that you brought that up. There is so many proverbs about counsel and seeking godly wisdom, and you get that from others of saying, hey, how do you see this situation that I'm facing, this decision I have to make? I need a different perspective, and that there's some wisdom in that.
Yeah. So for that guy, let's go with the example of if you have a guy who he's got a personality and he's dominant and he isolates himself, he's kind of blocked off and he doesn't want to have groups of other people, and he's like, I'm not going to church and I don't like all this mushy stuff of talking about our feelings and all this. Are there creative ways to create this authentic community with other men apart from sitting in a living room and it's like, let's talk about our feelings, or sitting at a coffee shop? What are some creative ways to create this masculine and authentic community?
Well, yeah, and get different guys view this differently, but most guys, in some ways, like to be active. Maybe that's saying, hey, that guy's got a son, I've got a son, let's do something together. Maybe it's as simple as playing basketball to start kind of breaking that ice, or maybe it's something a little bit greater, a weekend adventure, some sort of active idea. But I think honestly, the Four Fires is a great example of things that can break that ice. Having that bonfire where you're kind of pushing, like maybe comforts a little bit with the discussions, but it's usually question based, not just, I know this and you need to listen to me because I have it all figured out. Hey, tell me about how you're doing in your purpose fire, how you doing in your people fire. And it's around a fire, so guys always like to play with fire. And I think some of those active things, or just being outside a bonfire, is a great way to do that.
Yeah. I've got two guys in my life, and right now we're planning a kayak camping trip at the end of June. So I would say if you're a guy out there who you want to build, you need some friendships and you want to build some community, I'd say go do something fun like that together, and then be intentional about having some quality conversations when you're doing that.
Yeah, love that idea. And sometimes some guys are like, I don't have the capacity for that. I don't have the freedom to do that. but there are other simpler ways as well.
Right.
Sometimes if your kids are in sports and you're trying to connect with someone who's a dad of their kids, like, hey, let's ride together to this baseball game or soccer game. Let's just be in the same space and just talk life. Hey, how's it going? How's your marriage? This is what's going on in my marriage. Just guys usually do better side to side than face to face. So working together. So if you like woodworking, maybe it's whittling something. That's obviously not my gifting.
That's a really good
Side
point.
to side.
Side to side and not face to face.
Yeah, there's a time for face to face, but oftentimes it starts side to side.
That's really good. And I think what I'm hearing you say as well is share your story. Don't preach at someone else.
Yeah, I think be vulnerable first. I'm all for preaching the gospel. I'm all for inviting people to Jesus. But how do you do that? Do you do that by saying, I have everything figured out? Or do you do that by asking questions?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think by then weaving in your testimony and saying, hey, these are some of the things that God has done in my life. These are some of my low points, but this is how God brought me out. It can create a curiosity. And through questions, that's what Jesus often did, was ask questions that help people open up and help people even have like the light bulb go on, because he asked the right questions rather than just saying, this is what you need to do.
There's a lot of wisdom there. So what do you think makes a gathering of men sustainable and something that man actually wants to come back to?
That's a great question. And it's going to be different for different guys. But a few things I've learned is if guys show up to, whether it's a four fighters or just a small group, and they feel like there's one or two who know everything and they're way down here, they're probably not going to enjoy that. That's why I think having people come in some ways on an equal playing field of saying, we're gonna look at one story from the Bible today. If you're doing a Bible study with like either new believers or those who are just curious, let's just stick to one story. We're not going to jump to 10 different chapters and 10 different books of the Bible. We're going to stick at one story and we'll talk about that story. Now, there's a time to jump and do a full-on Bible study, but with those new believers or those guys who are just curious about faith, really quickly they could be like, wow, I'm so far behind these other guys, and that can be defeating. So I'd say try to come in on the same level in a sense, level the playing field. I think guys want to be valued and heard. So many guys would say, I don't have much to offer this group. I don't have much to offer. Yeah, every guy has something to offer. So figure out what makes them tick. Get them talking about things that they enjoy. And I'd say take it a step further. Take an interest in what some of the guys you're trying to connect with enjoy. Just ask good questions. Like, hell, you love fly fishing. Like, tell me about that. Like, what was your first experience fly fishing? Like, I've never been. So you can just ask questions about what they're interested in.
Yeah, that's really good. So if you're a guy who's going to be leading the group, you mentioned earlier that men want to feel like they're contributing. So if you're going to lead a group, think about the questions that you can ask that's allowing all of the men in the room to contribute. You don't want any one man to feel like, man, I don't have anything to contribute to this group. And with the right questions, there's always a way for people to contribute.
Yeah. A little bit of planning ahead of time. Text this guy, hey, would you be able to bring a question about this topic? Or, sometimes if you're doing food, hey, can you bring this? Like, don't do everything yourself. Invite people to participate in various ways. Invite someone to pray at the beginning if it's a Bible study. Invite someone to share their craziest story. It could have nothing to do with faith or even depth, but just sometimes you challenge someone like, hey, bring the wildest story you ever had. We want to hear this crazy thing that happened. We heard something about you in college. Like, we want to hear about it.
Yeah, that's really good. That's one of the things that we recommend with the Fire Circle Leader Guide is to pick somebody to bring a question or a discussion topic for the next meeting, and make sure it's not the same guy every time. Choose somebody different. Those are some things that are, I guess, best practices to make sure that your group is sustainable and that men want to come back. What do you feel like you've learned? I mean, you've done the campus ministry stuff, and you've just done probably countless small groups, and you're always wanting to build these authentic communities with people. So what are some of the biggest mistakes or challenges that you've found in trying to build these regular groups of men or men and women getting together?
A few things that come to mind about mistakes is, first of all, when I was younger, just trying to know everything and just be that perfect leader and say, oh, I spent hours and hours preparing this and I have all the right things. And then somebody brings something up and you're like, well, that doesn't fit with my script. It was probably control and pride or maybe fear of like, what happens if I let this out of control? I've learned to let go of a lot of that control, ask questions, really listen to what people are saying and care about them. The text message afterwards, man, thanks for coming, all those things. Different groups have different dynamics, so I don't know if you have to do that with everything. The other thing was at times we tried to put people together who had like interests. And it still sounds really good, except you also have to figure out schedules and their locations and everything else. And so at times people were driving, they were having to go 30 minutes away. And even though they were connecting with some guys they liked, it really was not a very good fit. So there are some logistics with it. I love the idea of connecting people who have like interests, but you also have to look at the practical, oh, that guy works on Tuesday, so he's going to be getting out of work, going straight to that group without having dinner and things like that. And so it's good to pair people who have like interests, but also you have to be practical about it. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's like, actually, it's good for us to be with people who have some different views or different interests, and actually we can sharpen each other in that way. And so I look at the
Yeah.
logistics as well.
Yeah. Because if the goal is to be consistent and regular, then you probably should find a group of people that are it's going to be easy to meet with. Thank you for tuning in to the Four Fires podcast. I want to take just a second to let you know about one of the resources that the Four Fires tribe offers to help you take control of your life, take ownership, and build some authentic community to become more four-dimensional. It's called the 30-Day Ruck. It's a 30-day challenge to live four-dimensionally. You commit to weekly tasks, abstaining from a few things, and having a Zoom call with your facilitator, that's me, and the other men that are going through the ruck with you. It's a great way to encourage each other, meet some new guys that are trying to live four-dimensionally, and really hold ourselves accountable and commit to something and then keep our commitment to ourselves, to becoming a four-dimensional man. Visit our website, fourfires.com, to see more about the 30-Day Ruck and how you can sign up and reserve your spot today. Thanks, and let's get back to the episode. Just a
It may not
10-minute
be the
drive.
only thing, but it definitely
Yeah,
plays into it. Can we be
yeah.
consistent together?
So what did you do for that guy you just mentioned who's like, oh man, he's like driving 45 minutes or half hour or whatever you said. What did you do for that guy? Or what did he
Well, part
do?
of it, just we started asking more questions. What actually works for you? When are you able to be in town? Because he wasn't like the normal student. He was driving a ways away. And so it was like, well, when are you in Mount Pleasant? When can you be around? What would be healthy for you? And it's like, oh, we could do Sunday before church service, Sunday after church service, or maybe there's an evening where he usually comes to town. And so just finding out some simple practical things about when it worked for him. And that kind of two things have really helped me either for myself or with others. One is like, what are my rhythms that I want to create? So if we're saying, I've never been in a small group or I haven't been in one in a long time, and you're saying, I want to do that, I want to do it consistently. So you have to figure out a rhythm. How can you make that a rhythm of your life? And maybe that's the Sunday after church. You stick around and you even form a group with maybe three, four other guys right after church. Like, hey, we're going to lunch and we're talking life. Maybe that's Monday night, but we're going to make that a rhythm instead of trying to do everything at once. Just say, hey, this is a healthy rhythm of my life that I want to create. And the other thing is goes along with that is stacking. I have a lot of freedom now, and it's tough because sometimes I can have a meeting over here and a meeting over there. It's hard to get things done because I have inconsistent meetings. So what I've tried to do in my own personal schedule, but also with groups, is let's stack some of these together. So if I have a meeting over on this part of campus with one person, I'm going to look to fill either the slot before it or the slot after it in a similar spot. It seems simple, but being a guy who's not that organized, I've had to learn organizing things can help so much. And so, how do you stack things? Like I said, with that guy who's coming from 30 to 40 minutes away, let's stack it on top of a church service and then a meeting, or a meeting and then church service, or how do you stack it within your rhythms, within your schedules that you have, that the people have?
That's great. What do you do to prioritize your wife and your kids above meeting with friends? Or if, in your case, if you're meeting with other college students, what do you do to prioritize that?
I think part of it's the rhythms of looking at the weekly schedule. And part of that's my meetings, part of that's our son's athletic schedule, but saying, okay, let's make sure we're having 3 to 4 dinners together as a family a week. And as a part of that, let's not just eat, but sometimes it's a simple devotional. By simple, I mean simple, maybe like 2 or 3 verses. Just like, what do you guys think? Sometimes it's that simple, but saying everybody's got to eat. So let's make that a priority to do it together and then bring some intentionality into those times when we're not running off to the soccer game or the football game or all the other things depending on the season. But then the other thing is just communicating with my wife, of saying, when do you have things? When do I have things? We tried linking our calendars before, but I put so many things in my calendar. It's like I'd set reminders to email people or text people. And so my wife was like, it's going off all the time. That's not going to work. We've learned we need to sit down face to face and kind of talk through, okay, what's this week look like? Are there any conflicts? Are there times where we're going different ways with different boys or different meetings? But really trying to communicate and over communicate with my wife. And then dinner's a big time for us.
Yeah, the reason I ask that question is because for me, 3 years ago, my people fire, specifically with my friends, was my lowest. Like I had some surface level acquaintances, but I had no friends who really knew me or people that I could go and talk about serious stuff with. And which was really weird because I was a senior year of college and I was on a baseball team. So I had these guys around me all the time, but I had no deep friendships. Soon after that, when I graduated and I started really living into this For Fire stuff, I was like, man, I need to build my friends fire. So over the last 3 years, I've really built some good relationships with some other guys in my life. I mentioned the kayak camping, and so I have some guys
Yeah.
that I'm really proud of that have built those friendships. In my experience, as I was trying to build those friendships, I would have my wife would say, hey, I just kind of feel like you're only planning weeks in ahead for spending time with your friends, and you're not planning weeks ahead to spend time with me. And I was like, this is so hard.
She's a
and
part of the people fire too.
That's exactly right. And I've had conversations with my friends, and we're planning a trip, and they're like, my wife's kind of mad at me because this and that. And I would tell them, well, make sure that you're prioritizing putting a time on the calendar with your wife before you put a time on the calendar for me, your friend, is really important. That's why I asked the question, was because for the listeners listening to this, we need to prioritize friendships and having that community with other men, but make sure that you're not neglecting your wife or your kids to do that, because it can be once a month. I mean, you're talking about having more regular, like once a week where you're meeting with people. So that's really what we're talking about. But the priority is important.
Yeah. And I realize some of that is my job. I do have that freedom. And so I realize not everybody has that freedom when they're working 40, 60, 80 hours a week. And so I do have some flexibility that people don't have, but I encourage people, what are your rhythms? How can you stack things so you can be most efficient? And part of that, some of those times that you don't want to neglect your wife, that's not good. That's not going to be healthy in the long run. And so maybe are there times where you can spend time with your guy friends, but it's also a double date. It's a
Mm.
camping trip with another couple as well. And so it doesn't always have to be just friends or just wife or just kids. A lot of times it's with your wife and your kids together, but you need time to just with your wife. And
That's
just like you need time just with your kids sometimes. Same with friends. You can include them in some of our ministry is we will have different college students over to our house sometimes, depending on the season we're in. And so what we're trying to model for them is a couple that is not perfect, but we're in pursuit of Christ and we're trying to raise our kids to know Jesus. And so come on in and you're going to see the mess of it all and the craziness of it all. But it's doing ministry, but it's also time with my wife, time with my boys. And it's not all perfect, but sometimes they go together.
Yeah, that's great. Next question is, when we're trying to accomplish something like building God's kingdom, and sometimes it's helpful to name what we're fighting against. So, what do you think the enemy of the church, the big C church, or the enemy of men's ministry and these gatherings that we're talking about? What's the enemy that you feel like we're fighting against?
I think the enemy, Satan, his goal is to steal, kill, and destroy. And it's easier to do that when we're alone. And so he'll use fear. He'll use the idea of strength. I can't be strong if I share who I really am or share what I'm really wrestling with. He'll use things that in and of themselves, like strength is not a bad thing, but he'll use that idea of like you're not strong.
Hey guys, it's Jeff. Thanks for watching this episode of the Four Fires podcast. If you're interested in becoming more four-dimensional, the best way, hands down, for you to do that is to start a Four Fires small group. Real life change always happens when we build authentic community and we're challenging each other, just like the Bible says, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. If you want encouragement, if you want accountability, if you want deeper friendships with some men in your life, a Four Fire small group is your next step. Visit our website to see more information, watch the Session 1 video to see if it really resonates with you and if it's something that you want to lead a group of men through. Fill out the application, and I would love to talk with you and provide you and the men in your group with all of the resources and the tools that you need to be equipped and empowered to start this small group and to become the four-dimensional man that God created you to be. I look forward to hearing from you, and until then, let's get back to the episode.
If you share this, you got to figure this out yourself. And so he keeps us isolated or keeps us fearful from opening up so that people really know who we are. And yet, I think we are our strongest when we are literally on our knees saying, Lord, I need your help. I need your help to be the man, the husband, the father, the employee that you desire me to be. And so what we're fighting against is one who wants to not just destroy us, but destroy us and others. To counter that, I think the best thing is to realize we're not in this alone. We come together with others to pray for one another, to sharpen each other, to encourage each other, all those things that I read in Hebrews 10 to help each other individually live out our faith. But we're stronger when we link arms with others.
Yeah. So I was just looking it up. I couldn't remember where the Bible verse was, but James 5:16 says, therefore confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed. So I think it's really good to point out for men in particular, because we're talking about men, and men feel like we have to have it all figured out. And if we share something we're struggling with, or we confess our sin to someone, it's going to make us weak. But that's the lie of the enemy. That's the lie of the devil. It's actually strong. It's strong. You're very strong when you confess your sins to your brother. And James tells us that you can be healed when you share. Because when you take the sin or the thing that you're struggling with, and you put it on the table in the light, Satan can't play with it anymore. But when you hide it and you're like, I can't let anybody know about this, that's where Satan can play with it and manipulate it and continue to lie to you. So yeah, that's really powerful. You're not weak when you're vulnerable.
You're stronger.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so Romans 8, it ends with this idea that we are now more than conquerors through Christ Jesus. And I always thought, I was like, what is more than a conqueror? I know what a conqueror is. It's to go and defeat something. So what is more than a conqueror? And as I wrestled with it and prayed about it and thought about it, it was just what came to my mind is if you're struggling with something and God brings you the victory over that, that means you've conquered it. But to be more than a conqueror is to take that and use it to defeat the enemy And so the idea is then you have a testimony of saying, hey, God brought me through this. God brought me freedom from this. And I want to let you know that he can do the same for you. Now you're being more than a conqueror because you personally just have conquered it, but now it's being used to encourage, strengthen, and give others hope that with Christ, you can overcome this thing too. You can find freedom from this thing too. You can get through this season too. Now that's being more than a conqueror, is using the things that were meant to kill you and actually using them to bless and benefit others. That's the power of a testimony.
Yeah, that's really good. Where's that from again?
The end of Romans 8.
Yeah, that's great. So if you're listening to this, go read Romans 8.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, I'm going to wrap it up here. Last question. So Josh, if you had 5 minutes left to live, what would you want the person listening to this podcast to know?
I would want the person listening to this to know that Jesus is where it's at. He is true life. And I believe if we get our relationship with Jesus, that does not mean perfect, but if we get it right, meaning we're pursuing him in his ways, asking him for help, asking him to lead us, I think our marriages will get better. Our families will get better. Our relationships with others, for the most part, will get better. He's where it's at. That's what I'd want you to know as listening to the podcast. That's what I want my wife and my boys just to be reminded of, is like, turn to Jesus. In the good days, turn to Jesus. In the hard days, turn to Jesus. He is with you. He loves you. And he desires to be growing in relationship with you, not just for the next day or two or month, but really for all eternity. So I'd want people to know, turn to Jesus.
Beautiful. All right, guys. Well, thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Four Fires podcast. If you're interested in creating some authentic community in your life, me and the Four Fires nonprofit would love to provide you with some of our Four Fires content. So visit our website. You can click the link in the description or just go to your search engine and type in the Four Fires Tribe and it'll pop up. You can read all about all the different resources we have, and I'd love to empower you and equip you and the men in your life to start creating this authentic community because we need it. Josh, again, thank you for your time. And maybe we can do another podcast, like I said, about your 30-day ruck experience in the future. But it was a pleasure to have you, man.
Yeah, it's fun to be here.
All right, guys. Well, with that being said, go live intentionally, and we'll catch you on the next episode of the Four Fires podcast.